At exactly 7:45 on a foggy Monday morning, Belinda Carter stood on the front steps of one of the most expensive homes in Pacific Heights, clutching a bucket of cleaning supplies and wondering why a man with a mansion needed another housekeeper. The front door opened before she had the chance to knock. "Belinda Carter?" the tall man asked. She nodded. "I'm Drake Harrison." His voice was calm, polite, and strangely distant, as if every word had been measured before it left his mouth. Without another greeting, he handed her a neatly printed sheet. House rules. Belinda glanced at the first page. "Don't touch anything in the library." She raised an eyebrow. The second rule caught her attention even more. "If anything goes missing, tell me immediately." She looked up. "Has someone been stealing from you?" Drake shook his head. "No." "Then why the rule?" A faint sigh escaped him. "Because every housekeeper I've hired has quit within a week." Before she could ask another question, he simply added, "I hope you're different." By late afternoon, Belinda had already cleaned 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and the enormous living room overlooking San Francisco Bay. On a polished walnut shelf sat an old silver pocket watch. Unlike everything else in the house, it wasn't expensive looking. It was scratched, worn, almost forgotten. She smiled as she gently wiped away years of dust. "There you go," she whispered to it, looking handsome again. She placed it back exactly where she had found it. 3 hours later, the pocket watch was gone. Drake searched the shelf twice, then the desk, then every drawer nearby. Nothing. He checked the security cameras himself. No visitors, no deliveries, no open windows. No one had entered or left the house. Finally, his eyes settled on Belinda. He didn't accuse her, but silence could sometimes feel heavier than blame. Belinda met his gaze without flinching. "No one stole it." Drake frowned. "You sound very sure." She smiled. "Because it'll come back." The next morning, the pocket watch was sitting on the same shelf, perfectly centered, exactly where Belinda had left it. For the first time in years, Drake Harrison had absolutely no explanation. Belinda had cleaned hundreds of homes across San Francisco. Tiny apartments, Victorian townhouses, luxury penthouses, even a yacht once. But Drake Harrison's house felt different. It wasn't dirty. Not really. The marble floors gleamed. The windows sparkled. Every bookshelf stood perfectly organized. The air even smelled faintly of cedar and fresh coffee. Yet the entire place carried an uncomfortable silence. Not the peaceful kind. The lonely kind. It felt like a museum where people had forgotten how to laugh. On her second morning, Belinda walked into the kitchen humming to herself while unpacking her supplies. She paused beside an expensive coffee machine. "You and I are going to be friends," she told it. Behind her came a dry voice. "You talk to appliances." She turned to find Drake standing there with a mug in his hand. "Only the nice ones." He stared for a second before quietly making his coffee. "You do realize coffee makers don't answer." "They don't have to." She grinned. "Most people don't either before 8 in the morning." To her surprise, one corner of Drake's mouth almost smiled. Almost. As the days passed, stranger things began happening. A dusty leather notebook disappeared from the library. It returned the following afternoon. An old music box vanished from the hallway cabinet. 2 days later it reappeared on the piano. A faded family photograph disappeared overnight, only to show up on the dining table the next morning. Always old things. Never expensive things. Never jewelry or cash. Belinda started keeping a notebook of her own. Pocket watch. Notebook. Music box. Family photo. She circled one sentence. "Only memories disappear." One afternoon, Drake finally explained why he had become so cautious. 18. Belinda looked up from dusting the fireplace. "What?" 18 housekeepers. She blinked. "That's oddly specific. They've all worked here, and they've all quit. Some after 3 days, some after 1. One woman didn't even finish her first afternoon." Belinda laughed. "What scared her?" Drake answered without smiling. "She said the house was haunted." Belinda waited for him to laugh. He didn't. Instead, he walked away as if he had repeated that sentence far too many times before. Not everything about the house was mysterious. Some parts were simply ridiculous. Drake owned the world's most enthusiastic robotic vacuum. Every morning it rolled confidently through the hallway before somehow finding Drake's shoes. Every single time, the robot bumped into his ankles with impressive determination. Drake sighed. Not again. Belinda burst into laughter. It likes you. It attacks me. She crouched beside the machine. You need a name. It absolutely does not. She ignored him. I'm calling you Kevin. The little robot beeped happily. There. He approves. Drake pinched the bridge of his nose. You named my vacuum. I gave him purpose. For the rest of the week she greeted it every morning. Good morning, Kevin. The robot would beep. Drake rolled his eyes. By Friday, without thinking, he looked down and muttered, Kevin, move. Belinda froze. A slow smile spread across her face. You just called him Kevin. Drake stopped walking. I did not. You absolutely did. I refuse to discuss this. She laughed so hard she nearly dropped her feather duster. For the first time, the enormous house sounded alive. That evening, Belinda couldn't stop thinking about the missing objects. She reviewed every strange incident in her notebook. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Nothing valuable had ever disappeared, only items connected to someone's past. Objects no thief would bother taking. Objects someone might miss emotionally, not financially. Near midnight she couldn't sleep. She stepped outside the small staff room for fresh air. Fog drifted quietly across the garden. The old oak trees swayed in the wind. Then, movement. Someone was walking between the flower beds, slowly and carefully. Not a burglar. Too calm, too familiar. Belinda instinctively ducked behind a stone fountain. An elderly woman crossed the moonlit path wearing a pale cardigan. Her silver hair shimmered softly in the night. In one trembling hand, she held the missing pocket watch. Belinda's heart skipped a beat. The woman never looked toward the house. She simply continued across the garden, as though she had walked that path 1,000 times before. Belinda waited until the figure disappeared into the darkness. Then she whispered to herself, So, the house isn't haunted after all. It has a visitor, and whoever she was, she clearly believed she belonged there. Belinda barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the elderly woman crossing the garden with the silver pocket watch in her hand. There had been no panic, no attempt to hide. Whoever she was, she had walked through the property as though every stone, every flower, and every tree already knew her name. The next morning, Belinda found the pocket watch resting exactly where it belonged. No scratches, no fingerprints, just quietly waiting on the walnut shelf. Drake noticed it before breakfast. He stood in silence for nearly a minute. I checked this shelf 3 times yesterday. Belinda poured herself a cup of coffee. I believe you. It wasn't here. I know. He turned toward her. You know? She smiled over the rim of her mug. I told you it had come back. Drake studied her carefully. For a brief moment, he almost asked what she meant. Instead, he sighed. I've stopped trying to understand this house. Belinda didn't answer, because she had already decided she would. That afternoon she began paying closer attention, not to the expensive artwork, not to the security cameras, but to the things nobody else seemed to notice. Fresh footprints in the garden after midnight, a gate that was always carefully closed by morning, tiny pieces of lavender caught on the wooden fence. Someone wasn't breaking into the property. Someone knew exactly how to get in. The following evening, Belinda deliberately left a faded music box on a hallway table. She polished it until the brass shone in the warm light. Then she waited. Nothing happened. Dinner came. Drake disappeared into his home office for another endless video meeting. The house became quiet again. Around 11:30, Belinda quietly slipped outside. The fog rolled gently across the lawn, turning the garden into a watercolor painting. She hid behind a large magnolia tree. Minutes passed. Nothing. She almost convinced herself she had imagined everything. Then, the small wooden gate near the back fence creaked open. The same elderly woman stepped inside. She moved slowly, leaning on a polished walking cane. Instead of searching through the house, she walked directly toward the hallway window. Her eyes found the music box. A gentle smile appeared on her face. So there you are, she whispered. Belinda couldn't hear every word, but she could hear enough. The woman carefully opened the side door with a key, not forcing it, simply unlocking it. She entered the house as if returning home after buying groceries. Belinda followed from a distance. The woman picked up the music box with remarkable care. Then she walked back outside. Belinda finally gathered the courage to speak. "Excuse me." The woman slowly turned. For several seconds, neither of them said a word. Then the older woman smiled warmly. "Oh, there you are." Belinda blinked. "I'm sorry? I've been wondering when you'd get home." Belinda looked around. Do you know me?" The woman reached out and gently adjusted a loose strand of Belinda's hair. "My goodness, you've grown up beautifully." Belinda's heart softened instantly. This wasn't confusion born from fear. It was confusion born from memory. The woman wasn't seeing Belinda. She was seeing someone else. "I'm Belinda." The elderly woman nodded politely. "Of course you are." Then, after a thoughtful pause, "You always did like changing your name when you played pretend." Belinda smiled gently. "I suppose I did." The woman laughed like a little girl. "Come, I've been waiting for you." Before Belinda could ask another question, the woman slowly walked toward a small cottage hidden behind rows of old rose bushes at the far end of the property. Belinda had seen the tiny building before. She assumed it was an abandoned guest cottage. Its white paint had faded. The porch sagged slightly, but the curtains looked surprisingly clean. Someone had been caring for it. Inside, Belinda stopped breathing. Every missing object was there. The silver pocket watch rested neatly beside an old framed photograph. The music box sat on a lace-covered table. The leather notebook lay beside an antique reading chair. Nothing had been stolen. Everything had simply moved, as though someone had been rebuilding another home, another time. The elderly woman looked around proudly. "There. It finally feels right again." Belinda whispered, "What is this place?" "Our house." The answer came so naturally that it almost broke Belinda's heart. The woman slowly straightened a family photograph before smiling at it. "He'll be home from work soon. We should have dinner ready." Belinda looked toward the photograph. A younger version of the woman stood beside a handsome man. Between them, a little boy of about 10 smiled with missing front teeth. The boy looked exactly like Drake. At that moment, everything clicked into place. This wasn't a stranger. This was Drake's grandmother. The woman suddenly frowned. "Where's my little grandson?" Belinda hesitated. "Drake? Oh, don't be silly," she chuckled. "He's only 10. He'll be home from baseball practice any minute." Belinda swallowed hard. She understood now. Some days the woman remembered the present. Some days she never left the past. They spent nearly an hour together. The woman, who introduced herself as Eleanor, brewed tea with practiced elegance. She spoke about recipes, neighborhood picnics, her husband William's terrible singing, young Drake chasing butterflies through the garden. To Eleanor, every memory had happened yesterday. Belinda listened without interrupting, without correcting, without reminding her that William had passed away years ago. Sometimes kindness wasn't telling someone the truth. Sometimes it was sitting quietly inside the world they still remembered. As dawn approached, Belinda helped Eleanor lock the little cottage. The older woman squeezed her hand. "You'll come back tomorrow?" Belinda smiled. "If you'll have me." "I always will." Eleanor patted her cheek. "I've missed having another woman in the house." Belinda laughed softly. "So have I." The next afternoon, Drake found Belinda standing silently by the kitchen window. "You've been smiling all day." "Have I?" "You have." She turned toward him. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "When was the last time your grandmother visited this house?" Drake looked genuinely surprised. "My grandmother?" He frowned. "She hasn't been here in months." Belinda's smile slowly faded. Because only 24 hours earlier, she had shared tea with Eleanor in the little cottage behind the garden, and judging by Drake's expression, he truly had no idea. For 2 days, Belinda said nothing. Not because she wanted to keep a secret, because she didn't know how to explain one. How do you tell a man that his grandmother had been visiting his own backyard while he believed she hadn't set foot there in months? She decided to watch, to listen, to understand before she spoke. Every evening after finishing her work, Belinda quietly slipped out to the little cottage behind the rose garden, and every evening Eleanor welcomed her as though she had been expecting an old friend. Sometimes Eleanor remembered Belinda's name. Sometimes she called her Emily, Sometimes she believed Belinda was a neighbor from 20 years ago. Belinda never corrected her. Instead, she simply smiled. "And how has your day been?" To Eleanor, it was always the right question. The cottage slowly revealed its story. Every missing object from Drake's house had found a new place there. The silver pocket watch rested beside William's reading chair. The faded family photograph sat on the fireplace mantel. The music box played softly beside the bedroom window. It wasn't random. Eleanor was rebuilding the home exactly as she remembered it. One memory at a time. One rainy afternoon, Belinda noticed Eleanor staring at an empty space on a bookshelf. "What belongs there?" Eleanor frowned, thinking hard. "A blue vase, the one William bought after our first anniversary." She looked around the room, confused. Where did it go? Belinda made a quiet note in her pocket notebook. Blue vase. The next morning, while dusting the upstairs hallway in Drake's house, she spotted it. Old, cracked near the base, easy to overlook. She gently wrapped it in a towel. That evening, she placed it back on the empty shelf inside the cottage. Eleanor's entire face lit up. "There you are. I knew you wouldn't forget me." Belinda had to blink away unexpected tears. The woman wasn't thanking the vase. She was thanking a memory for finding its way home. Drake began noticing changes. The house still felt spotless. But now, fresh flowers appeared on the breakfast table every Monday. The old piano in the living room was no longer covered in dust. Someone had repaired a loose kitchen cabinet without being asked. One afternoon, he found a handwritten note beside his coffee mug. "You're allowed to take lunch breaks. Even CEOs need sandwiches." No signature. It didn't need one. He smiled before he realized he was smiling. Their conversations grew longer. "What made you start a cleaning company?" Drake asked one evening. Belinda leaned against the kitchen counter. "My mom. She started it with one vacuum and an old pickup truck." Drake nodded. "And you?" "I inherited both." He chuckled. "The truck still running?" "Barely." "The vacuum?" "Still refuses to retire." For the first time, Drake laughed out loud. A real laugh, the kind that filled the room instead of disappearing after a second. Belinda noticed, so did he. The following Saturday, Drake surprised her. "I have nothing scheduled this afternoon." Belinda looked genuinely shocked. "Should I call the newspapers?" He rolled his eyes. "Very funny." She grabbed her jacket. "Come on. Where are we going?" "You'll see." 30 minutes later, they were standing inside a neighborhood farmer's market. Drake looked completely out of place among flower stalls, musicians, and children chasing bubbles. Belinda handed him a canvas shopping bag. "Congratulations. You're officially carrying the groceries. I own 3 companies, and today," she dropped a bundle of carrots into the bag. "You're the assistant." He sighed dramatically. "I've been demoted. You'll survive." The market became unexpectedly fun. Belinda insisted he sample homemade peach jam. He accidentally bought 3 loaves of sourdough because he couldn't say no to an 80-year-old baker. A little girl mistook him for her father and hugged his leg. Belinda laughed so hard she nearly spilled her lemonade. "You handled that surprisingly well." "I panicked." "You smiled." "I panicked while smiling." On the drive home, Drake glanced toward her. "I haven't done something completely pointless in years." "It wasn't pointless." "No, you smiled." He looked out the window. "I guess I did." That evening they cooked dinner together. Or, at least they tried. Belinda confidently declared she made the world's best tomato soup. 10 minutes later, smoke poured from the pot. Drake rushed over. "What happened?" She stared at the burned saucepan. "I may have been telling the soup a story." "The soup? It got interesting." He looked at the blackened mess. "I think it died from boredom." They both burst into laughter. Dinner became takeout pizza on the kitchen floor. It was the happiest meal Drake could remember having in years. Late that night, Belinda returned to the cottage carrying 2 slices of leftover pizza. Eleanor clapped her hands like an excited child. "I knew you'd bring dessert." "It isn't dessert." "It is, if you're 84. The 3 of them laughed together. For a little while, the world felt wonderfully normal. 3 mornings later, everything changed. Belinda arrived at the cottage. The front door stood open. The kettle still warm. William's favorite chair empty. "Eleanor?" No answer. She searched every room. Nothing. Outside, The walking cane leaned against the porch, left behind. Belinda's heartbeat quickened. She immediately called Drake. 20 minutes later, police officers filled the garden. Neighbors searched nearby streets. Drones scanned the park. Hours passed. Nothing. Drake stood beside the patrol car, pale and exhausted. I should have visited her more. Belinda gently took his hand. This isn't your fault. It is. I kept telling myself I'd make more time. His voice cracked. And now I don't know where she is. Belinda closed her eyes. She remembered every story Eleanor had told. The anniversary picnic, the old ferry, William's blue jacket, the sound of seagulls. Then one sentence echoed louder than the rest. William always waited for me where the boats came in. Belinda's eyes opened. The ferry pier. Drake looked at her. What? Not the tourist one. The old Hyde Street pier. She thinks your grandfather is coming home. Without another word, Drake jumped into his car. When they reached the historic pier, there she was. Eleanor sat quietly on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the bay, her hands folded neatly in her lap, smiling at the water, as though she had only been waiting a few minutes. Drake slowly knelt beside her. Grandma, she turned toward him. For one beautiful, heartbreaking moment, her eyes became perfectly clear. There you are. I was worried you'd miss Grandpa coming home. Drake couldn't answer. He simply wrapped his arms around her and wept openly. Belinda stood a few steps away, watching the reunion in silence. She realized something then. Love wasn't always about finding the right words. Sometimes, it was simply knowing where someone's heart kept returning. The ride home from Hyde Street Pier was almost silent. Eleanor sat peacefully in the back seat, humming an old love song that neither Drake nor Belinda recognized. Every now and then she smiled out the window. William always loved the fog, she whispered. It's easier to see hope when you can't see too far ahead. Belinda quietly looked away. She wasn't sure Eleanor was talking about the weather anymore. The following morning, Drake canceled every meeting on his calendar. His assistant called twice. His investors emailed 6 times. His board requested an emergency conference. For the first time in years, he ignored them all. Instead, he drove Eleanor to breakfast. They ate pancakes at a small diner she had loved decades ago. She laughed when syrup dripped onto Drake's sleeve. You've always been messy. Drake smiled. I definitely didn't get that from you. Oh no, she winked. You got it from your grandfather. Belinda watched them from across the table. This was the Drake nobody else knew. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, just a grandson trying desperately to hold on to the pieces of someone he loved. 3 days later, the Harrison family gathered in the library. Drake's uncle, Richard Harrison, arrived first, followed by 2 attorneys, then Eleanor's physician. Belinda hadn't been invited. She remained quietly in the kitchen, pretending to organize dishes while fragments of the conversation drifted down the hallway. This can't happen again. She wandered across half the city. It's dangerous. She needs professional care. Drake's voice remained calm. She needs family. Richard sighed. Family isn't enough anymore. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When Drake finally walked into the kitchen, he looked exhausted. Belinda handed him a cup of tea without asking. He accepted it. They want to move Grandma into a memory care facility. Belinda remained quiet. They think it's the safest option. And what do you think? Drake stared into the steaming cup. I don't know. It was the first time she had ever heard him admit those words. That evening, Belinda visited Eleanor again. The older woman was folding kitchen towels with extraordinary concentration. Each towel had to be perfectly square, otherwise she unfolded it and started again. My mother taught me this. She smiled. She said a neat towel meant a peaceful house. Belinda helped her finish the pile. After a long silence, Eleanor suddenly asked, Did I get lost again? Belinda hesitated. A little. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I keep forgetting. Her voice became almost childlike. I don't mean to make everyone tired. Belinda reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. No one who loves you is tired of you. Eleanor looked down. They must be. The sentence broke Belinda's heart. Later that night, she sat alone on the back porch. Drake joined her, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. I figured coffee would be a bad idea at midnight. She smiled. Probably. They sat in comfortable silence. The city lights shimmered beyond the hills. Finally Drake spoke. When I was 12, my parents traveled constantly. I practically grew up in Grandma's kitchen. Belinda listened. She taught me how to make grilled cheese. He laughed softly. She also convinced me vegetables made me taller. Did it work? I still hate broccoli. She laughed. So no. He looked toward the dark garden. I keep thinking, what happens if one day she doesn't remember me at all? Belinda answered gently. She may forget your name, but people rarely forget how someone made them feel. He looked at her. So make her feel loved, every chance you get. The next afternoon, Richard returned. This time he found Belinda watering flowers beside the porch. You must be Miss Carter. She smiled politely. I am. I've heard quite a bit about you. Something about his tone made her uneasy. He stepped closer. My mother has become attached. Belinda nodded. We've spent some time together. I'd appreciate it if that changed. She blinked. I'm sorry? People with Alzheimer's become emotionally dependent. The less confusion, the better. I don't think kindness confuses anyone. Richard's expression hardened. You work here. Please remember that. He walked away before she could answer. That evening Drake found Belinda packing her cleaning supplies into the back of her old pickup truck. What are you doing? She closed the toolbox. Leaving. His smile disappeared. What do you mean leaving? I finished today's work. No. I mean, why are you packing everything? Belinda took a slow breath. Because tomorrow I won't be coming back. Drake stared at her. Did someone fire you? No. Then why? She looked toward the house. Your family needs to decide what's best for Eleanor. They don't need someone they barely know making that decision harder. You aren't making anything harder. I am. She forced a small smile. If Eleanor keeps asking for me, they'll only think I'm making her hold on to the past. That's not true. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. The words escaped before Drake realized he had spoken them. They both froze. Neither of them knew what to say next. Belinda looked down. You hired me to clean your house. I didn't come here to become part of your family. You already are. His voice was barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard. If I stay, you'll have to keep choosing between me and them. I don't want to be that choice. Without waiting for an answer, she climbed into her truck. The old engine coughed twice before finally starting. Drake stood in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear down the hill. For the first time since Belinda had arrived, the house felt exactly the way it used to. Perfectly clean, perfectly organized, perfectly empty. The following morning, Drake wandered through the rooms before work. No flowers sat on the breakfast table. No handwritten notes waited beside the coffee machine. Kevin, the robotic vacuum, bumped lazily into a chair and stopped. Drake looked down. Kevin, the little machine beeped. I think she would have known how to fix you. He smiled sadly. Then he noticed something tucked beneath the sugar bowl, a folded yellow sticky note. Belinda's handwriting. Homes aren't remembered because they're perfect. They're remembered because someone inside made you feel safe. He unfolded another note taped beneath the kitchen cabinet. Don't forget to water the herbs. They forgive neglect faster than people do. Then another inside the pantry. Life is too short to save the expensive cookies for guests. Drake laughed despite himself. By lunchtime he had found 12 notes, hidden everywhere. Some were funny, some practical, some surprisingly profound. He carried the stack into the library and sat alone in silence. His eyes wandered to an old family photograph, then to the empty doorway leading toward the garden. For weeks he had believed Belinda was changing the house. Only now did he realize the truth. She had never changed the house. She had changed the people living inside it. That evening, Drake visited Eleanor. She sat quietly by the window, watching birds gather near the roses. Without looking at him, she asked softly, "Where's the girl who laughs?" Drake felt a lump rise in his throat. She went home. Eleanor nodded as though she already knew. After a long pause, she whispered, "You should go bring her back." He looked at his grandmother in surprise. What if she doesn't want to come? For just a moment, the fog seemed to lift from Eleanor's eyes. She turned toward him with complete clarity. "Then don't ask her to come back to work." A gentle smile spread across her face. "Ask her to come home." Drake sat perfectly still, because somewhere between the missing pocket watch, the burned tomato soup, Kevin the stubborn vacuum, and the laughter that had slowly filled every empty room. He had stopped needing a housekeeper. Without realizing it, he had fallen in love. For the next several days, Drake couldn't focus. Board meetings blurred together. Emails piled up unanswered. Even Kevin, the little robotic vacuum that Belinda had jokingly adopted, seemed to wander aimlessly around the house before stopping in front of the kitchen, as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. The silence had returned. Only this time, Drake noticed it. Before Belinda arrived, silence had simply been part of the house. Now it felt like someone had taken the heartbeat out of it. Late one afternoon, Drake received a phone call from Eleanor's physician. "There are good days and difficult days," the doctor explained gently. "But the difficult days are becoming more frequent." Drake thanked him and quietly ended the call. He sat alone in the library for a long time. His eyes drifted toward the old pocket watch resting on the shelf, the very object that had started everything. He picked it up carefully. Then, for the first time, he opened the back cover. Inside was a tiny engraving. "For Eleanor. Every moment is home with you." William Drake closed his eyes. Suddenly he understood why his grandmother had carried it away over and over again. She hadn't been stealing it. She had been trying to find her husband. That evening, Richard arrived once more. "The room is ready," he said quietly. Drake looked up. "What room?" "The memory care facility." "No." Richard sighed. "Drake, no. You're making this emotional. And you're making it convenient." Richard's patience finally broke. "You can't build your life around memories." Drake stood. "No. I build my life around people. They're not the same thing. They are if you love them." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Richard lowered his eyes. "I don't want to lose my mother." Drake's voice softened. "Neither do I. Then let's not make her spend her remaining memories surrounded by strangers." That night, Drake drove across the city. Not to a business dinner. Not to another meeting. He parked outside a small neighborhood cleaning company with a faded blue sign. Carter Home Cleaning. The lights inside were still on. Belinda was repairing an old vacuum cleaner on the workshop floor. She looked up in surprise. "I thought CEOs only came here when something expensive needed cleaning." Drake smiled. "It does." She waited. "My heart." Belinda laughed. "You practiced that line, didn't you?" "Maybe. It needs work." "I know." She walked over. "What are you really doing here?" Drake looked at her for several seconds before answering. "I miss laughing." The humor disappeared from her face. "So do I." They talked for hours. Not about love, about Eleanor, about fear, about growing older, about parents, about losing people before you were ready. When the conversation ended, Drake finally asked, "Will you come see Grandma tomorrow?" Belinda hesitated. "I don't work for you anymore." "I know. I'm asking as someone she loves." Belinda smiled softly. "I'll be there." The next morning, Eleanor was sitting beneath the old oak tree. She looked tired, but peaceful. When Belinda approached, the older woman smiled immediately. "There you are. I was afraid I'd forgotten your face." Belinda knelt beside her. "I don't think you ever could." Eleanor reached into the pocket of her cardigan and produced a tiny brass key. "I've been carrying this around. I kept forgetting why." She placed it into Belinda's hand. "It belongs to the cedar box in my bedroom. Open it when you're ready." 3 weeks later, Eleanor Harrison passed away peacefully in her sleep. She never woke that morning. The funeral was small, simple, exactly as she had requested years before. Friends, family, fresh white roses, no long speeches, only stories, the kind she had loved most. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Drake and Belinda sat together in Eleanor's bedroom. The cedar box rested between them. Belinda looked at him. "I think you should open it." Drake gently shook his head. "She gave you the key." With trembling fingers, Belinda unlocked the box. Inside were only 3 things: the silver pocket watch, a faded photograph of young Eleanor and William dancing in their kitchen, and a handwritten envelope. On the front were 4 simple words: "For the girl who listened." Belinda slowly unfolded the letter. "My dear Belinda, if you are reading this, then I have probably forgotten many things. Maybe I forgot where I left my glasses. Maybe I forgot what day it was. Maybe I even forgot my own reflection. But I hope I never forgot how safe you made me feel. Everyone tried to remind me what I had lost. You reminded me of what I still had. Thank you for sitting inside my memories instead of pulling me out of them. Please don't be sad for me. I already lived a beautiful life. Now promise me something. Take care of my grandson. He smiles more than he realizes. And don't let this house become quiet again. With all my love, Eleanor. By the time Belinda reached the final line, tears blurred every word on the page. Drake quietly took her hand. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. A month later, the Harrison estate looked different. The little cottage behind the rose garden had been carefully restored, not modernized, not renovated into a luxury guest suite, simply preserved. Inside, every familiar object remained exactly where Eleanor had left it. The music box, the blue vase, William's reading chair. The silver pocket watch rested on the mantel beneath a framed photograph of Eleanor smiling at the garden. Above it hung a small wooden plaque, Eleanor's Cottage, a place where memories are welcome. The grand reopening wasn't for investors. It wasn't featured in magazines. Instead, Drake quietly partnered with a local Alzheimer's support organization. Every month, families caring for loved ones with memory loss were invited to spend an afternoon there, to tell stories, to drink tea, to remember together. Belinda volunteered every weekend, not because anyone asked her to, because it felt like exactly where she belonged. One golden autumn evening, Drake asked Belinda to meet him beneath the old oak tree, the same place where Eleanor had handed her the tiny brass key. She arrived just before sunset. "What are we celebrating?" she asked. Drake smiled. "The first day this place finally feels like home again." He reached into his pocket and removed the silver pocket watch. He opened it one final time, then carefully placed it into Belinda's hands. "My grandfather once wrote, 'Every moment is home with you.'" He looked into her eyes. "I used to think home was this house. I was wrong." He took a slow step closer. "It's never been about walls, or furniture, or perfect rooms. It's always been about the person waiting for you when you walk through the door." He knelt on one knee, holding out a small velvet box. "Belinda Carter, you came here to clean my house. You ended up healing 3 generations of my family. You taught me that memories don't disappear when we share them. They become homes." He opened the box. A simple vintage ring caught the last light of the setting sun. "So, would you come home with me?" Belinda laughed through her tears. "You finally found a better line." Drake grinned. "I had a good teacher." She nodded before he could become nervous. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Kevin rolled across the garden path, bumped gently into Drake's shoe, and let out a cheerful electronic beep. Belinda burst into laughter. "I think Kevin approves." "I think he always did." They kissed beneath the old oak tree, while the evening breeze carried the scent of roses through the garden. For the first time in many years, the Harrison house didn't feel large. It felt loved. Every Sunday afternoon, laughter drifted through the garden once again. Children played hide-and-seek around the oak tree. Families gathered on the cottage porch, sharing tea and stories about parents, grandparents, and the memories they refused to let fade. Near the entrance stood a simple wooden sign, "Eleanor's Cottage," where every memory is treated with kindness. Visitors often noticed the old silver pocket watch displayed in a glass case. Many asked why such an ordinary object had been given a place of honor. Drake would always smile before answering. "It reminds us that love isn't measured by the time we have. It's measured by what we choose to remember." Belinda would quietly squeeze his hand. As the sun dipped behind the San Francisco hills, they locked the cottage together and walked back toward the main house. Drake glanced at her and asked, "Do you know what the funniest part of all this is?" "What?" "I hired a housekeeper." Belinda laughed. "And? I somehow ended up with a best friend, a partner, and the love of my life." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And you still owe Kevin an upgrade." He looked toward the little robot waiting faithfully by the front door. "I guess every member of the family deserves one." Hand in hand, they stepped inside. The front door closed gently behind them, and for the first time in a very long time, the house wasn't simply clean, it was home. Before we say goodbye, maybe this story leaves us with something worth carrying into our own lives. Sometimes, love isn't about fixing someone's broken heart. Sometimes, It's about sitting beside them long enough that they no longer have to carry it alone. Belinda never erased Eleanor's memories. She honored them. She never tried to change Drake. She simply reminded him that a house filled with laughter is always more valuable than one filled with perfection. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. The people we love don't need us to make every problem disappear. They simply need to know that, no matter how confusing life becomes, they won't have to face it by themselves. Now we'd love to hear from you. What moment touched your heart the most? Was it Eleanor rebuilding her memories, Belinda's quiet kindness, or Drake finally realizing what home truly means? Share your thoughts in the comments, and we read them all, and your stories often inspire the next one we tell. Don't forget subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories and turning on notifications so you never miss another heartfelt journey. Until next time, take care of the people you love, because sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply making them feel at home.